I'm awkward to get started, but then we'll just get into it.
Okay.
Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to Launch and Scale. Khierstyn here. Today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Joe Valley, the author of Exitpreneur. I'm pumped for this interview. When Joe connected with me a couple months back with this opportunity to talk to him live, I'm excited for a couple reasons. I feel that today is all about how to prepare your business for an exit. And I find that talking to a lot of online sellers, the idea of selling a business only really came top of mind to some of these sellers when COVID happened, and in times of panic, they weren't sure if they'd lose their business or what to do. And so I find that a lot of entrepreneurs, majority of entrepreneurs, they wait in the online space to go through a panic or something to happen in their life where they then just scramble to sell, as opposed to a few of the, I guess, more prepared entrepreneurs that I talk to that end up flipping brands, where they know from the minute they start that brand that in 4 years they want to have an exit and they're super clear on their goals. And today, Joe's actually going to be walking us through how to best prepare for a sale. And look, if you're watching this thinking, I don't want to sell my business, you actually may change your mind in the future. And I think it's important to go through this process to prepare yourself to have a much higher valuation by making some different decisions today. So I think that if you are someone who is curious about the process, whether you should sell and what that whole process looks like, you should absolutely chime in. And let's take it over to Joe. So first off, I think Joe's gonna be better at introducing himself, but Joe, being the author of Exitpreneur, has seen more than $500 million worth of deal flow go through for acquisitions of companies and online brands. And I'm just really excited to, I guess, pick your brain today. So welcome, welcome here.
Good to be here. You know, it's funny you talk about the people panicking with COVID. They were panicking with the tariffs. They were panicking with COVID. Now they're panicking with the supply chain issues. And it makes me think of training. And this is a little story that may sound kind of a weird start to a podcast, but
let's do it.
I woke up, maybe 8 years ago, and my kids were running a 5K. So I woke up and decided to run the 5K with them.
Yeah.
They were maybe, Lucas is 18 now, so 10 and 12 years old. Waking up and deciding to do something like that. I wasn't heavy, but I wasn't in 5K training shape.
Right.
I just woke up and I did it. And I thought it was going okay until within the first half mile, I was sucking air. Then by 1 mile, I got passed by 2 women, which is not significant at all, except for Khierstyn. Both of them were pushing strollers. Okay.
Oh.
So very, very bad. So I finished. It was painful. I got through it. My kids, I never saw them after the start line because they were just gone. And I did it, right? So I woke up and decided to do it, and I survived. Fast forward to October of this year, and I trained for it.
Yeah.
I went through an 8-week training program. I said, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to crush my fat butt time from 8 years ago, and I'm going to do really well. And the training was actually invigorating. It was exciting. I had a program. I had a plan. There's a plan out there for everything. Mm-hmm. And funny enough, like literally within the first half mile, I get passed by a woman pushing a double stroller. Okay. Now, I thought, that's okay. I chuckled a little bit. It was a downhill stretch, and I'm like, that's okay. I have a plan. I know my process. I know my pace. I'm going to do really well. Of course, I passed her and lots of everybody that passed me in the first half hour, I passed them and finished minutes ahead of them.
Yeah.
And it worked out really well. I had a fast time, I had a great experience, and I now will do it again because I know how to do it right. The same applies to exiting your business. You got to think of it as training, not planning. Everybody hates planning.
Yeah.
This is the Exitpreneur's Playbook. There's a lot of training references in there. And you get to choose your plan when your pain when you train for it, right? I chose the wrong pain in that 5K. Mm-hmm. I had bad pain. I was out of shape. It was embarrassing. It was humiliating. Whereas the good pain that I had with it at the end, and the second one I did was I trained for it, and I really pushed hard at the end to maximize my result. And that's what people can do when they train for the exit of their business.
And what's interesting is like part of what you talk about in your book is you managing the emotions of the entrepreneur you're dealing with when you're going through a sale and LOI and all that stuff. And what's interesting is that through that first 5K, you were probably thinking, I can't do this. Why did I sign up for this? All these like negative, I can't, but you finished and it was awful. And most people will think that was so tough, I'm never doing that again. And with most things in business, when you go through something and it's unbearably hard the first time because you're just kind of winging it and hoping for the best, that's when a lot of people don't show up again and try. Versus if you just do make the smart decision of working with people who have experience and actually going through the process and the training plan, that's when it's hard, but you have a lot more confidence and you just kind of show up and you actually end up further ahead. So it's super interesting, like going from the first like 5K where you just winged it versus doing it properly. And what a massive difference. Like if anyone's listening and you have a story, like share that in the comments, what that is for you. Cause that was me with my first triathlon. And it was like, I'm like, how hard can this be? And I made all the mistakes. We can have a whole conversation about that, all the mistakes, but I ended up training with the trainer that second time around. And what a difference with that.
This just goes to what I tell my kids, people. Anytime you think you're really killing it, there's somebody out there that's better than you are. In this case, I was killing it with a 5K. Khierstyn's running triathlons. Come on now.
Yeah, we don't need to focus on that. But a 5K is awesome, and everyone has to start somewhere.
Yes.
So I'd love to know, for anyone listening that doesn't know your story, can we have the Cliff version, Cliff Notes version of how you got into this?
Yeah, I've been self-employed since I was a kid, but I launched my my first entrepreneurial business as an adult back in 1997. My goal at the time was just to make as much money from the job that I was leaving, and it was $50,000 a year. I love being an entrepreneur because my first full year as an entrepreneur I made $500,000. It was great. Yeah. But that's not always the way it goes. So I had great years. I had awful years. I made years where I made a lot more than that, and years that I had negative numbers. Most entrepreneurs experience that. But I was in product marketing, radio direct response marketing, radio television infomercials. And then I took my last product 100% online in 2005.
Is it? Yeah.
Shed everything else. And then it ended up waking up and deciding to sell it in 2010. But fortunately, one of the three brokerage firms that I was speaking to said, look, man, you wait 6 months, you're going to make a whole lot more money, because it was 2010s and the numbers were coming back. Yeah. And that was Quiet Light. And basically told me to go away. It's in your best interest to go away, Joe. So I was hooked. Came back, sold it in November 2010, took a year off, and then joined the company in 2012. So everybody on the Quiet Light team has built, bought, or sold their own online business. Awesome. That is a very strict requirement. It can be e-commerce, SaaS, content, whatever it might be. And I joined when it was just 4 of us. It was a team of 4, Mark, the founder, Jason, Amanda, and myself. I think the average deal size back then was about $150,000. Yeah. And now our median deal size year to date in 2021 is $2 million. We've got a total of 15 advisors. We'll close $250 million in transactions this year alone. The majority of those are e-commerce, probably 65%, and then there's SaaS and content as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what the kind of spread is between SaaS content and e-com. And then in e-commerce, I said that weird, but do you fall under like that FBA roll-ups, or are you looking more for like the D2C brand? Like, what's your preference?
It's a combination of everything. It's hard to avoid, if the market is so big for FBA exits right now because of the aggregators and rolling up. But, so there's probably half our e-commerce stuff is there. And then the other half is most of their businesses off of Amazon. But that is becoming more and more challenging and more the exception rather than the rule, because so many people go for the low-hanging fruit on Amazon because there's an exit there. The reality is that you've got to do whatever you're good at to get started. And some people with no experience have more success on Amazon. I think off Amazon, it actually takes more expertise. And I know this is where you help people so much because there's so many different moving parts to generate that revenue, whereas Amazon is a little bit more focused and funneled. Yeah. That's why the non-FBA businesses have a higher valuation. If the numbers are all equal, the non-FBA business is going to sell for a higher multiple.
Yeah. Not to mention the owning your channel, because Amazon itself, we don't need to get too in the weeds here, but Amazon itself doesn't give you access to customer data. They seem to have all the control of your listings. So one would argue
that's why that's why it has more value. Yeah. Because if I'm a buyer, I want to buy something, as low risk as possible. So the lower the risk, the higher the multiple. If I own the customers versus Amazon owns the customers, my business is less risk, so it should get a higher multiple.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing that I think was the biggest impact for me reading this is the difference in mindset between someone deciding to sell versus someone being ready to sell. I'd love to explore that first to see kind of what is the difference in your mind between someone that decides to sell versus they are building a business because they know they want to sell it in 12 to 18 months.
It's emotional and mental preparation along with a huge financial difference. Let me give you one example. I was at a boot camp last week where it's all 10-figure sellers. Yeah. Now, most of these folks are in your world. They're not fully on Amazon. So they're able to get to 8 figures. And did I say 10 figures? 8 figures. Yeah. And do it because they're selling mostly off of Amazon on their own channels. And literally having a fireside chat with this guy, Kevin, and we're just chatting a little bit by the fire pit. And he's thinking about selling his business. And we get into ad backs, which is nay. Okay. Yeah. He gets $50,000 a month in cash back from the discount on purchases that he makes.
Right.
He had no idea that was an ad back. Okay, so $50,000, that's $600,000 a year. His business is worth 6 or 7 times, right? So that's $4.2 million if it sold at 7 times. $4.2 million added onto the list price of his business because he did a proper ad back schedule, or would, now that he was training for it. That's part of what the boot camp was about. Yeah. He's training for that exit. If he woke up and decided to sell, immediately he's getting $4.2 million less because he didn't know that cashback was an ad back. So that's one minor difference. The other is the mental and emotional preparation, right? There's a lot that goes into selling your business. It's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would just be doing it on their own. You can sell it on your own, but you're probably not going to get maximum value unless you've done it before and you're really you get a lot of free time on your hands. Yeah. So the emotional part is more towards the end, Khierstyn. It's more of you're 2 weeks out from $500,000, $1 million, $2, $3, $4 million. During the asset purchase agreement negotiation period is when most things fall off the rails. When they fall off the rails, the difference between a good and great advisor is the great ones get it back on the rails with no changes.
Right.
If you're selling on your own, if you just wake up and decide to sell and you have no training, you're not prepared for that, you will gladly renegotiate so you can get across the finish line 2 weeks from now.
You just instead of want to be done.
Yeah. And you'd be emotionally prepared for when that's going to happen as well. And all that, I talk about in the book. I talk about that when anybody wants to talk about it. I'm happy to chat about it. Yeah. A big part of what I do is therapy. I manage people's emotions and expectations more than anything else.
That is one thing that really surprised me as a business coach. I never realized that my role would also be like a therapist. I had a friend listen in on a coaching call one time with our mastermind, and I get off the call and he's like, people pay you for that? Because it was just therapy with I don't know how I feel about this deal. Maybe I should pull out, all that stuff. Yeah. So the stakes are a lot higher when it comes to somebody selling a business. Yeah. So, what are some of the common reasons you have entrepreneurs coming to you that why they want to exit?
Well, most of them are just emotionally tired, worn out, and just need to move on. That's the sad part, right? Yeah. Because they didn't plan it. They didn't train for it. If they trained for it, they'd set an exit goal in dollars. Mm-hmm. They'd put a date down, and they'd also write down how they want to feel about it. So, I'm going to sell my business for $5 million in Q1 of 2023. And when I do, all of my debt will be paid off. My kids' education is paid off, and I'm going to feel unburdened. And that's unburdened because I'm out of debt and I can do whatever the hell I want, on my next adventure. If they do that part of it, they're going to really have a higher value exit. If they just wake up and decide to jump into it, they're not going to have as much success with it.
Yeah, because I can see things like you talk about add back of cash back on rewards of like for marketing purchases and stuff. Those little hidden things add value to your business. Intentionally creating systems to make transition of the buyer easier once you step into
SOPs,
that. There's
that's
a lot
twofold. That's going to be, it's going to instill confidence in the buyer, number one, and number two, it's going to make your job as a seller after the transaction closes a hell of a lot easier, because there's always going to be a transition and training period after closing. I'm not going to give you $5 million, Khierstyn, and then just have you walk away and not help me understand your business.
Yeah.
I need you to stick around. And normally the language in an asset purchase agreement is pretty clear, pretty simple, and it's not a lot of time. It would say up to 40 hours over the first 90 days after closing. Pretty simple. Yeah. But the more SOPs you have in place, the less I'm going to need you. Yeah. So that's part of the preparation and planning as well. If you do that, then you truly will be able to go off and on your own, and you'll wake up and go to check your app and go, oh, I don't own this business anymore. I've been doing it for 5 years, but it's kind of nice,
Yeah. So you talk about, it's really interesting is that the seller, I feel like someone who's never been through this process before that decides they wake up today, they want to sell their business, and they look at valuing their company based on what they think their numbers are, based on what they think their market value is. And they don't take a second to look at the buyer, because ultimately the buyer is the one who decides the valuation of your company, deal terms, etc. Right? So I'd love to spend some time looking at how you can set up your business to be attractive from a buying perspective. And like you talk about these 4 pillars of value, risk, growth, transferability, and documentation. I'd love to spend a bit of time just kind of digging into some of those to see the buyer side.
Sure. So there's actually a 5th invisible pillar. If we think of those pillars, together, it's that person behind the business, the mortar that keeps it all together. Yeah. But if we focus on risk first, in the book, under each of these pillars, I talk about 6 different aspects. We won't go into each one, but just a couple of ones that stand out. So risk, the first one is age of the business. Okay. Is it 18 months old or is it 36 months old? Clearly, the older one would probably be more stable, gone through some experience that others haven't. So age is an important risk factor that buyers look at. The unofficial time frame that starts to get them comfortable is 24 months. Anything less than that, they start to discount the multiple. Yeah. The other part of risk is channel risk, and that can be, most people think, oh, Amazon is a channel risk, or just my site is a channel risk. It can be multiple things. Yeah. So channel risk could be, again, Amazon, or it could be just a hero SKU. If you think of that as one channel, you got one SKU doing 90% of your revenue. Yeah. You're walking on a knife's edge, unless you've got a protection, utility patent, design patent, things of that nature on that. Yeah. That can be a big risk. Or if you're a SaaS company and you've got 500 subscribers, but 250 come from one organization. If that organization says we're jumping ship, you just lost 50%. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, risk is pretty important. You got to look at it from the buyer standpoint, which is really, really hard for a seller, because you've been dealing with this manufacturer for 5 years. They're not going anywhere. They love me. Everything is perfect. You don't have any contracts, but they love you. That stuff is probably true, and that manufacturer needs you as much as you need them. Yeah. But the buyer doesn't know that. So risk is really important. Primarily, channel risk and age are the two that they focus in on. Growth is. Sorry, go ahead. You can ask a question. Do you actually mind? I'd love to dig into the hero product a little bit. Because we work with a lot of early stage brands that have that hero product, because some of them have come off Kickstarter where they've launched that hero product plus accessories,
And that in itself, early stage, is risky, but then they'll design other products and, increase the line. But why is having a hero product that does 70-80% of your revenue, why is that risky from a buyer standpoint?
Well, I can give you an example. I had a conversation with one of my most memorable almost clients. He wasn't my client because his business tanked because he had a hero product. But every time I had a call with him, we did a Zoom call, and he was down in South America. And Khierstyn, he was a shirtless guy, never had a shirt on. He's tattoos all over his leg.
Amazing. Right.
But he was doing $2 million a year in revenue in selling a pet supplement, one SKU, one bottle of pills. Yeah. And I'm like, I forget his name at this point. All I can see is a visual. I'm like, listen, this is a lot of risk. If your ads stop working for this particular product, you're out of luck. The revenue is going to drop. Oh no, it's easier because it only takes me 4 hours a week. One SKU is easier. It's much better. Turns out he also had one ad working on Facebook, and that was it. Oh, man. Okay. So he had the valuation of his business was around $1.5 million or so. And then we met at Traffic and Conversion. And then shortly thereafter, his Facebook ad that was working was disallowed. Yeah. And any new ads that he tried didn't pull the same traffic. And eventually his business revenue was cut in half. That's the risk. And that's just one example. It could be competition. I had an electronics business that I sold a couple of years ago now. Yeah. 70% of their revenue was from that one SKU that we were under a letter of intent. And during that period in due diligence, the buyer of the business, their CFO, bought the product, plugged it in at home, and it actually caught on fire. Okay. Oh. Now, why is that a hero SKU risk? Because it was generating 70% of the revenue. Now, it turns out that Apple's products catch on fire the same percentage or less than this one does. So we got through it. But then that particular product ended up getting delisted from Amazon because of a patent infringement. Somebody else actually had a patent to sell the product. Oh my gosh. 70%. Well, we got permission from the patent holder to sell in the U.S. and it worked out. It was painful, but none of it would have been relevant if they had 25% from 4 different SKUs.
That makes sense. Cool.
Yeah, it's just risk and balance. That's all.
And I love that because I just wanted to dig deeper into that in case anyone is listening to this and like, but my hero product's selling really well. We're fine.
Keep selling it, but add the next SKU, right? Yeah. Get into the next part, which is growth, right? So you've got that one hero SKU. If I'm buying your business, I want a clear built-in path to growth to expand. So hopefully you've already launched a couple of SKUs and they're at least breaking even when you list the business for sale, because otherwise you're going to reduce the value of your business. If you just launched them and you've lost $10,000 each on them, that's $30,000 times your multiple. You might have lost $120,000 off the value of your business. So break even on these clear built-in paths to growth. SKUs that have already been launched that all I have to do is let time go by and they're going to age and continue to grow. And then the timing of growth is really important. Mm-hmm. Some people tend to, like with COVID, panic sell and trends start to go the wrong way. They're tired, they're worn out, they're exhausted. They just can't do it anymore. And therefore they want to sell. Yeah. Whereas if they had sold a year ago when the trends were still going up, and this has nothing to do with COVID, your multiple is going to jump dramatically. Mm-hmm. So buyers are looking for year-over-year growth trends. They look at January this year compared to January last year as well. Mm-hmm. And when the trends start to go negative, the value of the business drops quite dramatically, mm-hmm. and the fear that the buyer has increases quite dramatically. So positive year-over-year trends and built-in paths to growth.
So what happens when you do things right and you've been preparing and in, say, 12 to 24 months, you want to be ready for an exit and you're getting your SOPs, you kind of get your checklist of stuff to make have a good valuation. What happens if things with the world, we'll say, I forget the word, but with the world, the trends start to go away you don't see. Do you rush to sell or do you ride the wave and hope for the best? Or should you just be on top of trends to see that?
Yeah, a combination of all three sometimes. It's everybody's individual circumstances must prevail, right? So some people are like, I actually like the business. I set this goal, but I'm good to hang on for another 24 months because I know I'll get through this rough patch. Mm-hmm. And on the other side, I'm going to make an extra $500,000 along the way. And by the time I sell, my business is going to be worth an extra $1 million. So I'm good. I'll hang on. Others just can't fight the fight anymore. Yeah. They're tired, they're worn out, and they need to move on. And so they should stop delaying listing their business for sale and get on it, because with each passing month, the business will become less and less valuable.
Makes sense. I love that. So we talk about month over month growth, but also comparing that to the last year is something that buyers look at. One thing I did see that you mentioned, that a big mistake that entrepreneurs will make is they will hand in cash statements of either annual projection, like annual records, and they won't actually break it down month over month. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. There's a due diligence firm out there called Centurica, Centurica. Chris Yates is the owner of that company. And he and I have chatted many times. He's been on my podcast. I've been on his. We refer a lot of our clients that are selling or that are buying, they're not our clients actually, to Centurica. And Chris will say, anytime a brokerage firm presents P&Ls with only a quarterly or annual view, they're hiding something. So buyers, don't ever buy a business if all you get a view of is the annual or quarterly views. Don't go under LOI with those either, because it's going to be a waste of your time because they're hiding something.
Yeah.
Sellers, you want to instill confidence, run a profit and loss statement, export it to Excel with a monthly view, and show everything so that, we can see annual year-over-year trends, and then I can see year-to-date how we're doing compared to last year, how this month is doing compared to last year. The details instill confidence and build trust, and with trust, the deal gets done and the valuation is actually higher.
Then how far back would you go?
I say let's go back as far as possible, right? Okay. Let's go back to inception of QuickBooks if you have it, or Xero if you have it.
Okay.
And this is the e-commerce world. People haven't been around that long. So as far back as you can, but at a minimum 24 months, because that's that age, right? Mm-hmm. And if all I can get are annual views, prior to 24 months, that's fine. I'll put in, at least I can show annual trends prior to 24 months ago.
Love it. Yeah, to see if the increase in sales is seasonal or a decrease in sales not seasonal. It just tells a more granular story with what's going on in the business.
Yeah, and when it comes to seasonal, it's important for people to understand that, if you've got a business that, 80% of it is driven in Q4, the best time to sell is not in January. Right? You need to think about the buyer of your business. Yeah. And therefore, the best time to sell might be in, August or September. So they own it. They've got a month or so, and then they're getting the benefit. If you wait until January, your business is not going to sell, or they're going to ask for a huge seller note or an earnout or something like that, because they're not going to get any revenue, or 80% of the revenue, until Q4.
Yeah, that's great. Which I think that's a good lead into transferability. This is something I did not consider before reading a little bit more into this. So what do you mean by transferability to the buyer?
Yeah, I mean, your business is you right now, right? So that's challenging in some ways. So you need to think about building, the business without you. Maybe it's going to be hard because your name is the URL. So, but a lot of people don't think about this. So it first and foremost, it goes without saying that if a business is, if the assets that generate the revenue of the business are not transferable, you do not have a sellable business. Yep. When it comes to someone whose name and face is why people buy the product, for instance, it's still sellable, but there's going to be a longer transition period. I sold a prepper business a few years ago. You know what a prepper business is?
Well, why don't we just...
Doomsday, right? They think the world is coming to an end, and they're partially right with COVID, but they're very paranoid about dangers of the world. So not only is it a prepper business, but it's a prepper owner. So She was the name and face of the business. She was 70 years old. She wanted to retire.
Yeah.
She didn't want to sell it to Ewan and then just have Ewan use her name and face without her permission. So the negotiations and details of that, as I said before, normally the training and transition is up to 40 hours over the first 90 days.
Yeah.
In this case, it was a year-long transition where Ewan could use her name and face, but he had to have those emails and articles written well in advance so that she could approve them because it's her name that was being put on them. And then every other one, and then
gradually phase her out.
Two, and just gradually fade her out over a year. It's just a longer process, and you don't immediately get to cut the ties.
That makes sense.
Still sellable, though.
Yeah. So just really listing off anything that can't transfer when you have a new buyer. That could be a business partner. It could be, the name is something close to me because I am the spokesperson for my brand, right?
Yeah.
We do have some physical product creators as clients that are the face of the brand because they're the story. So I think it's super interesting to look at the difference between, like, do you make the decision when you first get started to have your face as a brand, like as the front of the brand, or do you make the decision to have a spokesperson, not the founder? So.
And in some cases, if you are the face and name of the brand, I was just told with Peggy, you can, her name was Peggy, you can transition out of the business. It's just going to take longer because the buyer is going to be fearful that everybody's going to go away. But you can also, stay on for even a longer period of time and just do the fun stuff that you love. How hard is it to podcast? Not at all. It's easy, right?
Yeah.
We just get to hang out and have a conversation. So you could do that. You could do coaching calls, or people like this could do coaching calls. And then, the daily grind it out kind of stuff, the accounting, the marketing, all of that, would be taken over by the company that buys it. And you can just do the fun stuff, at least for, a longer period of time. Exactly.
And would that be considered an earnout?
No.
Or just different? Okay.
No, I would still go for a sale.
Yeah.
But you would stay on and you'd get paid for your time. Or if you wanted to do an equity role and stay on to do it for ever, and own 15, 20, 30% of the company for those services. An earnout is a dirty word or two. Often they're combined together and separated as well. But it means that I'm going to buy your business, but I'm not going to pay you all cash. I'm going to pay you 50% cash and then pay you 10% of the net income until I pay you another $500,000. So I'm not paying you. The business is paying you. That's an earnout. You've got to trust me that I'm going to run the business well. Yeah. I don't like earnouts on the bottom line like I just talked about. I like it on the top line revenue because that way nobody can mess around with the expenses. But most businesses in the e-commerce world that are, even under, I would say 5 million in value don't have an earnout. Most of them are mostly cash.
Awesome.
It's just the competitive world we're in today.
All right. So I know we've really just skimmed the surface, but we've covered some of the high level points that people do have to consider to be ready to sell or make the decision to whether they want to sell their business or not. I'm curious, when it comes to what is not a fit, I'm curious if there's anything that you've seen that makes a brand a bad fit for an acquisition.
Yes. I tell you what, before I answer that, we forgot about the fourth pillar, which is documentation, risk, growth, transferability, and documentation.
Yes.
I forgot about it too.
Must not forget. Let's do that, and then we'll go back to that question.
I'm going to guess that 70% of the people listening don't use QuickBooks or Xero. So you have no documentation that's worth any good to anyone else. So cut it out. Hire an e-commerce bookkeeper. It's cheaper than a car lease. Even a nice car lease, it's cheaper. Yep. Don't bring somebody in-house. Just outsource it to an e-commerce bookkeeper. Get it done right. It should be accrual accounting. Otherwise, if you do cash accounting, you might be selling your business for a lot less for what it's truly worth. If you're out there buying a business and you're buying direct from somebody and they're using cash accounting, they're growing like crazy and they've got lots of inventory, buy it quickly because you're going to get instant equity. Yeah. Okay, documentation is the most important of the four pillars. We really can't start evaluation until you have proper documentation. No buyer's really going to get beyond an initial conversation with you unless you have proper documentation. So knock it off, that 70%,
Do
hire
it.
an e-commerce bookkeeper, use accrual accounting, and get it done right. All right, on to bad fit. What makes it a bad fit for buyers?
What makes a brand a bad fit for buyers? Yeah.
Well, oftentimes it's that hero SKU, right? If they're 90%, if they're built on Facebook advertising alone, those two combinations right now are scary,
Yep.
right? Facebook's getting better, but still buyers haven't caught up to getting comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's
so
rocky right now.
That kind of makes it risk and a bad fit. If it's trending down year over year and you want a strong multiple, forget it. Nobody's going to buy your business.
Yep.
80% of your revenues in Q4, but you want to sell in January, forget it. Nobody's going to buy your business. And then there's the categories that dramatically limit the amount of people that would be interested in buying your business. We have a listing that we just did a valuation on that was no one on the team wanted to take it on.
Okay.
And it's exercise poles. Can you imagine what an exercise pole is?
It's a stripper pole.
Yeah. I think it's basically they call it an exercise pole. But you look at it, it's a stripper. Nobody on our team wanted to represent that product. Yeah. Finally, someone that was actually in the area yoga space before that sold a business in area yoga.
Yeah.
Said, those are often used for yoga as well. So that person decided to do the valuation. Whether we'll get to the full listing, because it's just going to be really hard to sell.
It's so
right?
niche. Yeah.
So everybody, on the Quiet Light team is an entrepreneur first and foremost. All built, bought, and sell. We get to choose what we take on.
Yeah.
So we're only going to take on sellable businesses. The niche is all the other things, risk growth, transferability, documentation, that all could mean it's a bad fit for us because we know it's going to be a bad fit for buyers if things are bad. Yeah. But we're also not going to take on vaping products because they're hard to sell. People are afraid of legislation. Mm-hmm. We're not touching porn. We're not touching cigarettes. And the exercise poles is iffy as well. No gambling, things of that nature.
Yeah.
And then even where, if you are the name and face of the product and you just want to exit and go away, I'm not taking it on because I know it's not going to sell because buyers are going to be terrified that all the customers are also going to go away too. So sometimes the owner of the business has demands that are unreasonable, and the buyers, we know that they'll find them so unreasonable that the business is therefore unsellable.
Yeah. It's full stop. Just that deal won't continue. So
exactly.
And then I guess I'd love to flip that question around. What would you say in summary would make a brand very attractive to a potential buyer?
Yeah, multiple channels of revenue, multiple SKUs, good year-over-year growth, clean financials where I can run a P&L real easily. It's on an accrual basis. Mm-hmm. I can do a clean, easy add-back schedule after things are exported because that's when it's done. It's not done in QuickBooks or Xero. And somebody that's really likable. Strangely enough, that makes a huge difference, right? If I'm on a call with, a business owner and they're just a little shady and not likable, I know buyers are going to see the same thing and they're not going to trust them as much. And if they don't trust them, they may not be able to pull the trigger. But if they're looking at you, cheery, happy, confident, nice, professional, you're instilling trust and confidence in me. So the buyers are going to feel the same way. Mm-hmm. So it's an easy decision. All of those things matter. In fact, I've seen sellers flip it, in terms of being a buyer. I've seen sellers choose a not all cash buyer over an all cash buyer at the same price.
Yeah.
Just because they liked the other person more. In a situation where it was $2.3 million, they got an all cash offer from one person, and the other buyer had to do it with an SBA loan, which meant they had to. Right. And at that time, the seller had to hold a 10% note, so $230,000 less at closing. That seller chose Nathan in this case because Nathan was likable. He cared about the business. He cared about the employees. He wanted them to transfer to him. He wanted them all to have long and successful careers with him. And that meant a lot to Syed, who was selling the business.
Yeah.
So being likable is important on both sides of it.
Which is why you have that hidden fifth pillar that isn't really a pillar, but it is the most important.
It really is. Yeah. My business and partner and I joke about it all the time. It's definitely a pillar. It holds the pillars together.
Yeah, it's the glue.
It's the glue. There you go.
So, Awesome. Well, we're almost out of time here, but I have two last things to ask you. The first one is there anything that I should have asked you that I haven't today?
Yeah, we didn't talk about multiple ranges.
Oh,
It's. I know the audience wants to know about it. Everybody
yeah.
wants to know about multiples. So we're at multiple solving today.
Okay.
When I get that question out of the blue, I say multiple of what? And that's trying to gauge whether that person really understands where valuations come from. So just to be clear, it's a multiple of sellers' discretionary earnings. What is sellers' discretionary earnings? It's net income plus add backs equals sellers' discretionary earnings. What's an add back? It's a owner benefit, a personal expense, a one-time expense that does not carry forward. It's complicated, and most people lose their shirt if they don't do a good job on add backs. So multiples are growing. They're everybody's talking about multiples going up these days.
Yeah.
Year to date, I looked just before we hit record, we've had an average of 4.5 offers on every single listing so far this year. Every single listing, 4.5 offers. The multiples are up pretty dramatically.
Yeah.
Now, again, keep in mind that our median deal size is 3.7. I'm sorry, is $2 million. The multiple is 3.75 as an average, okay, for e-commerce businesses.
Good to
So the larger the business, the larger the multiple. If you have a business that's doing $200,000 in discretionary earnings, you're probably going to be in that 3 to 4 time multiple today. If you've got a business that's doing $1 million in discretionary earnings, you're probably going to be in that 4 to 6 time multiple range. So the larger the business it is, the more secure and less risk it is, and therefore the higher the multiple it is.
Gotcha.
So multiples are important. They change regularly, so you always want to get up-to-date information. And the only one other thing that I'd say there is that every e-commerce investment banker, broker firm, whatever you want to call us, with the exception of one, is a multiple of discretionary earnings plus the landed cost of goods sellable inventory. So if you do $1 million in discretionary earnings, we list at $5 million, and then if you got $500,000 in inventory, that's separate. One brokerage firm doesn't do that. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong.
It's just their way.
But it's their way, and they include it. So always make sure you understand a multiple of what. Is inventory included or excluded? Otherwise, you could get some misinformation.
So one term that's thrown around a lot, and you clarify this, but I'd love you to clarify it now. People look at EBITDA and say, oh yeah, my EBITDA is, I'm looking for this. But you specifically say that you do seller's discretionary earnings over EBITDA. So I'm curious why.
Yeah, EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. So really, my guess is that their EBITDA is blank. It's not even EBITDA. It's probably net income because that's what's on their bottom line. But let's just say, Khierstyn, that you're doing your net income is zero, okay? But you pay yourself a salary of $250,000, and you work less than 40 hours a week running the business. Does that mean your business is worth zero? No. It's an add back. So you in most cases in e-commerce businesses that we look at today, there's not depreciation because there aren't any hard assets. There's not amortization. There's not interest. In some cases, interest might be the most common one. So you're going to put that in the add back schedule. But EBITDA doesn't take into account, the owner operator salary. It doesn't take into account cash back monies. It doesn't take into account the website redesign that you had last year, and you only do it every 3 years, so at least 33% of it is an add back. It doesn't take into account your mobile phone that you use, that you write off through the business. I have a mobile phone. I guarantee you that's not an expense that's going to carry forward to me if I buy your business.
No.
Well, that's an add back. So it's seller's discretionary earnings, which is net income plus add backs, one-time expenses that don't carry forward, and owner benefits and perks.
Gotcha.
Cashback money is a perk, right? The IRS hasn't figured out how to tax it yet, right? That's the bottom line there. People put it over into their personal accounts, but if they put it on their P&L, it would just discount their expenses by that much. So
yeah, thank you for clarifying that, and I'm glad I asked you that question.
It's the most confusing thing for people to understand is a multiple of what and what are add backs. I've got an entire chapter on add backs alone. And it's confusing, even, for people that are doing, $30 million in revenue, like Kevin, who I had the fireside chat with. He didn't understand it. It's complicated, and it's one of the most important things to understand where you really are today. Because if you set that exit goal, and you say, I want to exit for $5 million in Q1 of 2023, you need to know where you are today. And unless you can properly figure that out with a proper add back schedule, you don't know how close or how far you are from that goal.
Yeah, I love that. Well, guys, I'm going to put a link to Joe's book on Amazon, Exitpreneur, down in the comments. But this has been fantastic. So thanks for your time. I wish we had more time. But Joe, if people want to learn a little bit more about working with you, some of your coaching programs or whatnot, what's a good place to send them?
Exitpreneur.io. It's very hard to spell. I'm sorry. I chose a complicated name for a book. Or you can go to quietlight.com. That's my, business brokerage firm, M&A firm specializing in online businesses, quietlight.com. You can see the listings, you can see the multiples, and there's a ton of content as well. At exitpreneur.io, there are free chapters that I give away of the book. If somebody doesn't want to spend the money on a book at this point, they can download some free chapters as well.
Simple. Love it.
Simple stuff. And you can follow me on Twitter at @TheJoeValley.
Awesome. All right, guys, I'm going to drop all those links below. So if you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to do that. And if you are watching this on YouTube, please thank Joe for his expertise coming on and sharing his wisdom with you. Like this video, comment, say thank you. And apart from that, Joe, thank you so much. And we will talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me on.